But I'm going to be talking about comparing nvidia stock to Bitcoin. And if you think about pretty much any person within the Western world right now, if they have a pension, whether they know it or not, probably a significant amount of that pension is actually allocated to companies like nvidia. And we've seen what nvidia has done for the last couple of years. Like, it's been astronomical. I think it's the only one that's actually outperformed Bitcoin. I think. I could be wrong. I don't know the story here. The point is that I think that a lot of people are invested in nvidia one way or the other, whether they know it or not, through index funds, through their pension fund. All these big funds include these magnificent seven in their indexes, right? So I want to compare nvidia, both the numbers and the bigger picture here of what's happening. So let's maybe start with the numbers. About six months ago on this show, we did a comparison of Bitcoin to Microsoft, and we looked at the PE ratio of Microsoft. So I got a spreadsheet here that I'm going to bring up from that time. So this is from Microsoft at the time that I did this. This is an old spreadsheet, but I think it's still relevant for comparison here. So this is how we're calculating the, where are we here? I don't want to confuse people here, but this is basically what the PE ratio is. So the price, that's what somebody pays to own a share. That's the share price, divided by the earnings, the after tax of what the company will produce in 1 year. So we looked at Microsoft here. We had, at the time, the market cap of Microsoft was 2.73 trillion. Their earnings were 75 billion. And so their PE ratio was about 36.4, which, if you look at the average of the stock market right now, I'd say the average is around 20, 25. So you have to wonder why Microsoft is higher than that. Why are people paying more of a premium? And just for like a very basic understanding of this, it basically suggests if you were to buy one share, how many years would it take to essentially recover your investment? In this case, it's 36 years. So if you bought one share in Microsoft, based on the company's performance, it would take 36 years to recoup that investment, 100% of it. So why would somebody do that? Well, number one, there's not a whole lot of other options out there. But number two, the way these big companies, the Mag 7 works is like Microsoft. They have a ton of just passive investment from people's retirement funds. So the amount of inflows just by being in like the top 100 or in some of these big indexes, the passive flows into this. That's what creates these premiums on the Microsofts, on these NVIDIAs, on these shares. So again, you buy one share of Microsoft, it's going to take you 36 years at this time. It's probably changed a little bit from now. 36 years to recoup that cost. So let's look at this. So we're going to compare that to Bitcoin right now. So the highest return, just like this is an average, is 178%. The lowest, I think this is over like a 4-year average. So of course you've seen some outliers within Bitcoin where it's like 50,000% a year, but this is like a 4-year rolling average. You looked at Bitcoin performance over any 4 years, the highest annual return is 178. The lowest is 24%. So conservatively, I mean, you go with 50. So which creates a PE ratio of 2, which means that if you bought Bitcoin, it would take you 2 years to recoup the cost that you paid. So compare that to 36, which Microsoft had. 36 years. Bitcoin historically, 4-year average is 2 years. That's conservatively. And if you look at like what the normal person would say, maybe 60%, that's what Saylor goes with, 60% annual return, but 75 even. So that's a PE ratio of 1.33. In other words, you want your PE ratio to be very low. The lower it is, the faster you get your investment back. So how much would you pay for a share of Microsoft? So the stock price at this time was $405 and the PE ratio is 36. That means that the actual price that somebody should pay for this stock is $11 based on their earnings. And it's 405. So let's go over to NVIDIA. This is even crazier. So again, we're going to use the same numbers here. 4 years, the highest was 178, the lowest was 24% from Bitcoin. And so that's it. We're going to go with these two kind of numbers here. The PE ratio conservatively, 2 years or 2, and then what a normal person would consider to be the average, 75%. So a PE ratio of 1.33. So how much would somebody pay for NVIDIA? So the stock price of NVIDIA right now is $136. Their PE ratio is 53.6. So you can type these into your AI, your Google right now. You can say, what's the stock price of NVIDIA? I did this a couple days ago, so it might be a little bit different. But you can type in, what's the PE ratio of NVIDIA? 53. 53. So you buy one share in NVIDIA, it's going to take you 53 years to recoup that investment. Not recoup it, but to get 100% of it back. So this is what, based on that, this is what the actual price of NVIDIA should be, $2 a share. If the stock market wasn't incredibly manipulated, if the stock market wasn't based entirely on future potential, if there wasn't so many passive inflows from capital with no other way to nowhere else to go, the fair price of NVIDIA stock would be $2.50. And so then you compare it to Bitcoin. You say, okay, well, Bitcoin's like the best performing asset, and we're saying that Bitcoin is a 2 PE ratio, then it should be $5 a share if you're comparing it directly to Bitcoin. So that's the PE ratio. That's how out of whack that is. But if we think about, these are the things that I really want to dial in on if you're comparing NVIDIA to Bitcoin. So let's look at if you had two choices, if you had some capital and you're looking at buying either NVIDIA or you're looking at buying some Bitcoin. These are a few things that I want to point out, aside from like the PE ratio and the actual historical performance of these two assets and the earnings of these. I mean, Bitcoin doesn't have earnings, so it's not a really apples to apples comparison here, but you can still say if you invest $1 in Bitcoin, it's going to take you 2 years to get that dollar back 100%. So there's no products, there's no services, but that has been the historical return of Bitcoin. So let's look at the competitors here with NVIDIA. What does NVIDIA do? They create, they're like an AI company, right? They create technology. I mean, maybe let's just check with AI to see what NVIDIA's actual, selling point is. What does NVIDIA do? So it says, NVIDIA is a technology company that specializes in designing advanced graphic processing units, GPUs, and AI technologies. So their core business area is developing high-performance GPUs for gaming, professional workstations, and data centers, creating AI hardware and software solutions, and producing specialized computing platforms for various industries. Okay, so these guys, they're competitors. Think about who would be a competitor in that world. You're up against the Googles, you're up against Apple, you're up against IBM. You got a lot of competition. Some very capital intensive industry here. Like if you look at the Meg 7, they're all tech stocks. So competitors are high, very high. NVIDIA, their competitors are here, and they will continue to grow, in my opinion, as technology improves, and as we shift away from like the 10,000 employee companies to like, you look at Tether, there's like 20 people that run a $10 billion per year business. So competitors are going to grow in this space. Who's the competitor to Bitcoin? Gold? Ethereum? XRP? So Bitcoin has, in my eyes, no competition. I mean, to most people though, they would see Bitcoin as gold would be a number one competitor. Real estate would be another competitor. Stores of value would be a competitor to Bitcoin. But in my eyes, Bitcoin is the best store of value. Supply chain. I mean, we can start with Bitcoin here. Bitcoin has no supply chain. I guess it's entirely dependent on the Bitcoin mining. If we look at the supply chain of new Bitcoin here, let's take a look at the, if you guys think this is a good thing or a bad thing here, let's take a look at the hash rate. So I know that this isn't like a really great comparison or a great analogy, but I think it is very similar in terms of like how new Bitcoin are created, the mining. So you can see the hash rate here. This is the amount of people that are powering the Bitcoin network, that are securing the Bitcoin network, and who are competing to mine the next block, which creates new supply of Bitcoin. So this is around where Trump got into office last time. You can see we were pretty much flat, and we see what happened there. And then this is about when Space Force took over. I think it was June of 2019. So those are two pretty big areas within the hash rate that not a lot of people focus on there. But this is the supply chain, essentially, of Bitcoin. Looks pretty good to me. But let's talk about nvidia. NVIDIA's supply chain. They are totally reliant on chips to continue their business. They are fully reliant on their supply chain to create these chips. And I think the majority of them are made in Taiwan. And if you look at what's been going on between China and Taiwan over the last couple of years, I would say that their supply chain is a huge risk for NVIDIA. Like if one of their data centers or production facilities gets blown up or taken over, that takes a huge hit to NVIDIA. And I saw something just to show the magnitude of what NVIDIA is right now. I think they were talking about it on the Quant Bros the other night, but they said that NVIDIA in the last week has gone down, I think 5x the total market cap of MicroStrategy. So in 1 week, NVIDIA's stock price went down 5x the total market cap of MicroStrategy. So that just goes to show how big this thing is, and how if something were to disrupt their supply chain, what could happen to their stock price and everybody who's affected by that. So I'd say this supply chain for NVIDIA is a massive risk for them. The PE ratio we have already covered. It's like 50. What was it? 53 to 2. So who's winning all these so far? The competitor, Bitcoin, won that for sure. They're not competing against Apple, Microsoft, Tesla, IBM. Supply chain, Bitcoin wins that one every time. PE ratio, Bitcoin destroys that. And forced buyers, if you look at what's kind of held up the price of NVIDIA from crashing, is the forced buyers. Because they're number one in terms of the stock market, that just has so much passive flows coming in just because they're number one. So a lot of the shareholders of NVIDIA, they are forced buyers. It's not like they're excited about NVIDIA. They're just forced to hold NVIDIA through these different index funds. And if you compare that to Bitcoin, nobody's really forced to hold Bitcoin. It's totally voluntary. And in fact, even a lot of the companies that do want to hold Bitcoin, they can't. So if you compare those two, like NVIDIA has all forced buyers for the most part, or people who don't really understand the ratios and other things involved here. Whereas Bitcoin, there's people dying to buy Bitcoin. That's why MicroStrategy has been so successful in being the highway that allows this capital to flow from these big funds into Bitcoin. So Bitcoin wins that too. And right now, NVIDIA has 90% of the market share, 90%. So in terms of room for growth, if NVIDIA had like 10, 15% and they were really on the up and up, that's a whole different story. But when you already have 90% of the market cap, what do you think the odds of going up versus going down would be from that? And if you compare that to Bitcoin in terms of the room of the growth, like just take a look in the mirror, ask yourself how many of your friends and family and people in your network actually not only own Bitcoin, but understand Bitcoin. So we have 1,000,000 miles to go in Bitcoin, and nvidia is pretty much topped out. They got 90% of the market share already in this market, in their industry. So to me, Bitcoin has way, way higher to grow. Custody of the asset. And a lot of people don't really give a shit about this, but a lot of people do. You can't take custody of your NVIDIA shares. You see it on the screen, your broker handles it. We trust the fact that they actually have the shares and they're not being lent out and manipulated. But with Bitcoin, you can absolutely take custody of that asset. It's the only asset that you can actually truly own. So I do foresee a day in the future where as things progress here, as all these assets become tokenized, I do foresee a day where you'll be able to actually take custody of your NVIDIA shares, but not today. So if we're talking about today, Bitcoin definitely has that as well. CEO risk. Bitcoin has no CEO. Bitcoin has no head that you can chop off. Bitcoin has no CEO that could be involved in a scandal or do something stupid or embezzle money or anything like that. Bitcoin has no CEO. There's no risk of somebody there's no human that could jeopardize Bitcoin. It's a network. It's not one CEO. It's not a board of directors. It is the Bitcoin network. One of the things that makes so much sense about Bitcoin is the fact that there is no company. There is nobody who can change the rules. There's nobody who can issue more shares. There's no CEO of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin, to me, wins that one as well. And the worst part about NVIDIA, to me, is that they have all this capital. They're in the tech space, and they have zero Bitcoin. A lot of the robotics and products and services that NVIDIA is actually creating are going to accept Bitcoin in the future. And NVIDIA themselves has zero Bitcoin. So of course we can't really compare this. I don't think there is a winner here, but I will call this one WTF NVIDIA. What are you doing? Bitcoin can't own Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is Bitcoin. Whereas NVIDIA, they have a bunch of cash, they have a bunch of expectations, but in reality, they have a technology. They have 90% of the market already. They have a lot of risks in terms of what could go wrong, in terms of their CEO, in terms of their supply chain, in terms of their competition, moving faster and moving more methodically than them. So the number one asset for the majority of people, individuals, companies, index funds, is NVIDIA. And if you compare it to Bitcoin, holding Bitcoin compared to NVIDIA share, it's not even a close comparison. And I think that if people actually understood this, instead of just so passively trusting their advisors, trusting the system that they're in, I couldn't imagine what would happen if everybody on Earth looked at this objectively, saw this video essentially. It just doesn't make any sense to me. It makes zero sense. So not only is, you could say that NVIDIA is either way overvalued, which it is with their PE ratio, but then what I'm more focused on is just how undervalued Bitcoin is. Because when you talk about gold as its main competitor, and it's eventually going to overtake gold in terms of market cap, but then you look at real estate, and then you look at like these companies like NVIDIA, where a lot of this capital is currently being held. So that's kind of my that's what I want to get into today. It's pretty crazy. Again, and I want to give a shout out here to My Path to Fire. I see a lot of comments in there. I got about 7 minutes here. I knew I'd wait till the last minute here, push it as far as I can. But that's the analysis there. So I want to say thank you to, once again here, Locks Guy, who gifted another 10 88 Sats radio memberships on the channel. Very, very, very generous. Incredible, actually. So thank you for that. That's not the first one, not the second one. I think that's the third time the Locks Guy has purchased a bunch of memberships for people in the community here. So thank you for that. Yeah. NVIDIA has a CEO who wears a leather jacket or a leather coat. He's cool. Yeah, and this is absolutely right. The supply, if we're talking about the supply chain here of Bitcoin, supply will always be the same, whatever the hash rate is. That's true, whether there's one miner or 1 million miners. But in terms of just like the overall security of the people giving a shit about the supply, it is directly tied, in my eyes, to the amount of people who are contributing there to the network. Braun, look at this. We got $5 super chat. Says, do you think the US government will buy at these prices? I think they're hyping the market before a recession, then we'll buy on the way down without saying anything.